Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. Today I'll be sharing how you can make a giant cupcake cake but without a special cupcake mold. You can use any round pan to make this and it's really easy. I made the cupcake cake with butterflies and pumpkins, but you can make it with all sorts of details. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make my fondant details because they need a few days to dry up. So it's always a good idea to make them a couple of days in advance. So coming to the butterflies, I want them to dry at an angle because that way I can be sure that they're gonna hold their shape once I put them on the cake. So I have made this drying rack out of a silver foil and you can manipulate the angle of your butterflies by opening it wider or making it more narrow, so you can play around with it. So for the butterflies, I have a cutter. You can use any sort of a cutter. You can use a paper, draw a shape, cut it out, and then use a sharp knife to form that shape out of fondant. And if you notice here, I am clearing up the edges of my butterfly before I take it out. I find it make it more crisp and it's easier this way. It's you don't mess up the edges, they still turn out really sharp. And since I like it really crisp, I go over it again to make sure that it's just completely perfect. So the next fondant item that my cake requires are these little different sized pumpkins. I'm using peach color fondant and I'm rolling it between my hands until they're super smooth, there are no cracks and no bumps, and I'm gonna make them in different sizes. Another little tip that I wanted to add in here was making extras of everything so that you don't run out of anything, and if something breaks you have extras. Now coming to the details on the pumpkin, I'm using a tool. If you don't have a specific tool, you can use back of your butter knife, you can use toothpicks, all sorts of things that might be laying around in your kitchen you can use to add details. Coming to the stalk of the pumpkin, I'm using a ball tool to make a little indent. You can use anything that has a curved tip or an edge to make this. This is just to help the stalk sit a bit better on the pumpkin. It's not compulsory, but it's a good idea. So now I am just adding some gold luster dust on top of my pumpkins to make it look more glitzy and more glamorous. You can opt this out too if you don't have it. It's perfectly okay. For the stalk, now I'm taking little piece of brown fondant and I have cut into a irregular log like shape, and I'm using my knife to make some details, some wooden details on top of it, and then I'm gonna add it on top of my pumpkin with just a little bit of water, not too much, just a little goes a long way. And for the swirly bits that go on a pumpkin, I am so sorry, I don't know what these are called. I'm making a snake out of my fondant and I'm rolling it on a toothpick, and that's how you get those nice swirls. And again, I'm using a little dab of water to stick them to my pumpkin. Don't use too much water because then it starts to melt everything that you make. So at this point, I felt that my butterflies looked a bit flat and I wanted them to have a little gradient and make them pop out a little bit more. So I decided to add some petal dust. Please, if you plan on doing this, add the petal dust before you put them on the drying rack to dry. Otherwise, they're too fragile and they may break. So this is a little something, a little heads up, do it before. So for this cake, I used my 6 inches pan and I used about 1.5 recipe of my soft moist vanilla cake, and I used 2 batches of my Swiss Meringue Buttercream because I also had to make the flowers, which I also made a day before, a night before actually. I'm gonna link the instructions for that, the video tutorial for that as well. And now we are going to carve our cake. I'm gonna cut it in a slant because I need to have that little angle for the bottom as well as for the top. If it's hard for you to cut it at the moment, put it in the fridge for a little while so that it's a bit hard and easy to cut. And then for making the top part, I am cutting it again in an angle, a bit inverted angle as compared to the one I used for the bottom. And if you notice, the lower 3 parts of the cupcake, the the cake, sorry, are going to be the wrapper, and the above top parts are going to be the top of the cake. So I used 5 layers in total, and this cake was at least 6 inches high when it was done. So now, because it's a curved cake, you have to make sure that you do a really good job of concealing all of those crumbs and do a really nice crumb coat. You still want it a bit thin, but you want it to cover all the nooks and crannies. So this is how it looks, and I'm going to put it in my fridge for at least an hour before I start my final coat. So before I say anything, please excuse me for the quality here. The sun was about to set and I just completely forgot that I was using the wrong camera. So for my final layer, I'm going to be using light pink colored Swiss Meringue Buttercream. You can use any color, any buttercream you like to use. You can even use ganache, that works pretty well too. And I'm gonna go again in an angle because I really want it to have that slightly angular shape to give it that real cupcake feel. And then I'm going to smooth it as best as I can, not too much because I want it to have a very organic feel. And I'm using a palette knife to clean the edges as well. And then I'm using my palette knife again on the sides to give a wrapper like look to the bottom of my cupcake. You can use a wooden skewer too if you don't have a palette knife. And I'm just going to clean it up a little bit before I pipe out my petals. I'm gonna chill it again for at least 30 minutes before I pipe out all the ruffles so that I don't accidentally mess anything out that I just worked so hard on making. So for making the ruffles, I'm using a large petal tip, a curved petal tip, and since I want the ruffles to be a bit organic too, I'm gonna go heavy-handed at some parts, light-handed at others. And for making the ruffles, you just need to pipe out and wiggle your hand while you're doing that, and it should be giving you really pretty ruffles. So the more pressure you give it, the tighter they're gonna come out. The less pressure you give it, the lesser the open it's gonna be. And I'm gonna go in both the directions so that they look really organic, just like, you know, on a tutu they're going everywhere. So that's the look I'm going for. You can pipe it out, fill out all the spaces. Make sure you have enough buttercream on hand because this do take a lot of buttercream to pipe out. So next comes the fun part, which is the final part, and I am always excited about it. You get to put all the pretty decorations that you made. You get to dress up your cake. It's always a good idea to know where you want to put the things, because if you put it on the wrong place, especially when it's a buttercream cake, it's pretty time consuming and not a very easy thing to cover it up and clean it and do it again. So this is how my cake looks. I decided to add a bit of edible little pearls. I also added some more glitter on my butterfly, and if you notice, I'm sweeping it against the edges. What that does is it gives it a very nice clean edge of gold at the corner, and it also dusts really beautifully, so it looks a bit more peachy and pink, and it has those pink hues as well. Also, do you know you can paint your buttercream with edible luster too? Just make sure it's pretty hard and it's not melting. These had been in the fridge for about a day and they're straight out of the fridge. If they're melting, it's gonna be a mess, so make sure it's pretty solid once you decide to do that. And here I wanted to add a little tip for you guys. Although all that glitter painting makes a big mess, especially on a cake board, so just use your lemon extract to go over the nooks and crannies which are really hard to get. I use a Q-tip, and once I have cleaned that up pretty well, I also go over the cake board with a tissue towel and just clean everything up, and it does such a wonderful job of cleaning all of that. Because if you ever try to clean it up with water, it just makes a lot more mess rather than cleaning it up. And this is how it looks at the moment. I hope you liked this video. Please do give it a thumbs up if you did, and please keep coming back to my channel. I love making videos for you guys. This is the final look of the cake. I was so happy with it. If you tried this out, please do tag me in your final results. I would love to see that. Until next time, a homemaker baker over and out.